If you've been watching any videos on my channel, you'd know there's only two things that can kill a giant squid. One, a sperm whale, or two, an even more giant squid. But recently, studies have shown something new, something that really shouldn't be happening. Another animal is hunting giant squid, and it's not a 90,000 pound whale. It's not a 50-foot long super ultimate giant squid. It's just this thing. To understand just how absurd this matchup actually is, you have to understand what a giant squid actually is. If you're picturing a normal squid but scaled up a bit, stop. The giant squid is genuinely dangerous and is by no means some sort of gentle giant. They can reach lengths of over 40 feet and they weigh hundreds of pounds. And instead of being like normal squids, they have weapons. Every single giant squid has two massive tentacles that are lined with hundreds of suction cups. But instead of being normal suction cups, the inside rim of every single sucker is lined with serrated rings of chitin, which is the same hard material that makes up insect shells. When a giant squid is grabbing you, it's less suction and more physically ripping into your skin. This is going to do a bit more than tickle. After it grabs you, it'll use its solid beak to cut you in half. And then we have the swordfish. A swordfish has no armor. It doesn't even have scales. Its skin is completely smooth. It doesn't have claws, it doesn't have tentacles, and it doesn't have a giant crushing bite. It's essentially just a very fast tube of meat with a pointy bone sticking out of its face. If you look at the raw biology and the physical tools each animal has, the swordfish has absolutely zero chance. The squid has the reach advantage, the weight advantage, the grappling advantage, and the weapon advantage. But realistically, this isn't even the issue. In fact, it shouldn't even be possible for a swordfish to try and fight a giant squid, because these animals shouldn't even be able to interact. The ocean is divided into very strict vertical zones, and the animals that live in one zone almost never cross into the others. Swordfish live in the epipelagic zone. This is the top 200 meters of the ocean. It's warm, it's full of sunlight, and it's packed with oxygen. This is where the vast majority of ocean life lives. Giant squids live entirely in the midnight zone. This starts at about 1,000 meters deep and goes down to 4,000 meters. These are two entirely different worlds, and a giant squid is definitely not coming to the surface, unless on some really rare occasions where it's dying, or already dead. So if the squid can't come up, that means the swordfish has to go down. But usually, fish built for the sunny surface shouldn't be able to survive a trip to the midnight zone any more than a human could survive a trip to the surface of Mars without a spacesuit. But swordfish just do it anyway. Every single day, when the sun goes down, swordfish perform what's called an extreme vertical migration. They point their noses straight down and they just dive. Surprisingly, their bodies are actually strong enough to survive the pressure, and they can dive even deeper than killer whales. But the pressure isn't even really the issue here. Well, it is, but there's another problem. If you take any normal surface fish and drop it into water that's barely above freezing, it's going to die. Fish are cold-blooded, which means their body temperature is entirely controlled by the water around them. When the water gets freezing cold, their blood gets freezing cold. And when blood gets freezing cold, everything in the body gets cold. And then, surprise surprise, you die. Swordfish, very fortunately, have something built into their skulls to help stop exactly this. Right next to their eyes and their brain, all swordfish have a tissue that's essentially a modified eye muscle, and this muscle's only purpose is to twitch. To twitch and twitch and twitch, and twitch so much that it starts generating pure heat. This tissue warms the blood that flows directly into the swordfish's eyes and brain, keeping those specific organs significantly hotter than the surrounding ocean, and actually allowing it to live. But okay, so the swordfish can actually see the giant squid in the dark. That's great, but you still actually have to kill a 40-foot giant monster. When most people look at a swordfish, they assume it hunts exactly the way it looks like it hunts. You have a giant spear on your face, so you swim really fast and stab things like a shish kebab. But if you actually think about the physics of the ocean, stabbing a giant squid is a terrible idea. If a swordfish swims up to a 40-foot squid and just stabs it directly in the center of its mass, the swordfish is now stuck. Its weapon is lodged inside a massive animal that has 8 arms, 2 feeding tentacles, and a face that's definitely going to eat it. And when you're fighting a deep sea monster, literally handing yourself to it is a really bad idea. So they don't stab. The bill of a swordfish is completely flat, which makes it operate exactly like a broadsword. When a swordfish attacks, it swims directly into its target at incredibly high speeds, and right before impact, it violently thrashes its head from side to side. Kinda like Fruit Ninja, if the fruits could actually fight back with giant tentacles. This of course wouldn't really work that easily against something like an orca or a shark, so it works best against something soft, exactly like a squid. Squids don't have bones, they're entirely soft tissue. Their central nervous system are housed right in the middle of their squishy mantles. The slashing can either cut the squid or stun it so badly that it can become nearly paralysed. The swordfish needs to disable the squid as fast as possible to actually win. This all sounds really cool, but how would this fight actually play out in the real world? When you put these two animals in the same room, or well, the same vertical water column, there's a bit of a different strategy they have to win. The giant squid relies entirely on stealth. Because it lives in the dark, they literally just sit there. And they'll keep sitting there for essentially forever, until some unfortunate prey finally gets within range, and the squid will only then react. In a fraction of a second, it will shoot out its tentacles, grab the prey and pull it in. It's an ambush predator. It needs the element of surprise. The swordfish, considering they look pretty similar to marlins, the fastest animal in the world, are also designed to go fast. Water is nearly 800 times denser than air, so if a swordfish is moving 50 miles per hour underwater, you can see how much force is going. Realistically, if a swordfish manages to spot the squid and is able to get a strike, it's going to win. The squid has absolutely zero physical defense against this. It has no scales, it has no shell, it has no armor. It's just a giant bag of soft, delicious protein. Or, well, I've never tasted them, but I assume swordfish like the taste. So if the squid can't fight back against the initial strike, what happens if it just tries to run away? Let's say the giant squid sees the swordfish coming at the last possible second. It dodges the slash, turns around, and tries to swim away as fast as it can. This creates an even worse problem for the squid. Animals that live in the deep ocean have a massive weakness. They have absolutely no stamina. In the midnight zone, food is incredibly rare. You might have to go weeks or even months without finding a single meal. Because of this, deep sea animals have evolved to have incredibly slow metabolisms. They conserve every single ounce of energy they have. When a giant squid moves, it uses jet propulsion. It sucks water into its mantle and blasts it out of a siphon to shoot itself backward. This is great for short bursts of speed, but it's horribly inefficient for long distance swimming. If a giant squid tries to sprint, its muscles rapidly fill up with lactic acid. Within minutes, it completely gasses out. The swordfish, on the other hand, just came from the surface. The surface of the ocean is packed with oxygen. It has virtually unlimited stamina compared to anything living in the abyss. So if the squid tries to run, it really can't run for long before the swordfish will catch up to it. But squids do have one famous trick to escape predators. If running doesn't work, why don't they just use their ink? Everyone knows that when a squid gets scared, it shoots out a cloud of ink to blind its attacker and escape. And giant squids are real squids. They are still capable of inking. But if you think about it for a second, shooting black ink into the midnight zone makes genuinely no sense. It's already completely pitch black down there. Spraying black ink into a black ocean doesn't actually hide you. Imagine you try to fight some dude who's blind and you tried to take out his eyes. Okay, so is the giant squid just completely screwed? If the swordfish is so fast, has unlimited stamina, and completely bypasses the squid's defenses, how are there any giant squids left? Are swordfish just diving down and slaughtering half their population every single day? I know I've been talking about giant squids as if they're all just one consistent giant creature, but giant squids don't just spawn in the ocean at 40 feet long. Realistically, fighting a fully grown giant squid every single night would be incredibly dangerous and frankly a huge waste of energy. Even if it could win, it's risky. You can just leave the big boys to the sperm whales. So swordfish mostly go after juveniles. When a giant squid is only 3, 4 or 5 feet long, it's the perfect size for a swordfish to, well, completely obliterate. At this size, the squid doesn't have the mass or the strength to fight back anywhere near as strong. The swordfish are basically just spawn camping them. But obviously, it's not just as easy as you just select your matchup and pick easy baby giant squid. Let's assume that a swordfish dives down into the dark, spots a target, and realizes too late that it's actually ran into a fully grown adult. even though the swordfish has a massive advantage in speed, vision and aggression, this fight isn't 100% guaranteed win for the fish. The swordfish plays a very dangerous game of hit and run. They rely entirely on their speed to slash the squid and swim out of reach before the squid can react. But if the swordfish makes one single mistake, the entire fight flips. If the swordfish misjudges its slash, or if it gets a little too close and loses its momentum, well, then it might be screwed. The giant squid finally gets to use its weapons. It'll lash, pull, and if it's able to, bite. Kind of exactly like what it does to sperm whales. Except since swordfish are 100th the size of a sperm whale, they're actually vulnerable to this. If the swordfish loses its speed, the hunter instantly becomes the hunted. But if the squid is losing this overall matchup so badly, why hasn't it evolved better defenses to stop the swordfish? Well, the deep sea is an incredibly stable environment. The temperature never really changes, the pressure is always the same, and the ecosystem moves at a very slow pace. Because the environment is so stable, the animals down there evolve incredibly slowly. The giant squid has basically looked and functioned the exact same way for millions of years. They found a strategy that worked, and they just stopped trying. But the surface of the ocean is incredibly different. The surface has things like orcas and tiger sharks. Animals at the surface have to evolve rapidly just to survive. The swordfish is a product of this fast-paced surface evolution. You don't really see anything this fast in the ocean unless it's at the surface. And then, when they take all those surface adaptations and bring them straight into the deep sea, the giant squid never really stood a chance. They're trapped in an evolutionary lag, completely outpaced by a modern surface invader that the deep sea never prepared them for. A lot of us look at the giant squid and we automatically assume that it must be at the very top of the food chain. And in some ways, it is. But only for things in its own zone. Anything else that enters its zone from a much more violent world has potential to compete. No, this doesn't mean clownfish can beat giant squids. They're still dangerous, deep sea or surface, but they're not the top of the entire ocean. They just look a lot more creepy. But anyways, as you might know, I'm personally a huge giant squid fan. And if you enjoyed this video and want to see a video about a squid even bigger than the colossal, you can check it out here. Also, please leave some suggestions in the comments for future videos, because I will actually read your comments. And if you want to see my second channel about things out of the ocean, check the link in the description.